Hi guys, I'm Jason White. This is my channel, Jason's Weird Reads. Thank you so much for joining me. So this is my reading update, my recent reading update. Basically continued from the last one that I did, because I'm not really doing the monthly thing anymore. I might start doing the monthlies again next year. But I was talking with Dane on his channel and doing the quarterly thing. Might be doing that, I don't know. But I have a lot to cover. It's not going to be anything like Dane, where, you know, he's read like 44 books. And this isn't everything I've read. This is stuff I want to read as well. And I'm going to be reading off my laptop, so please don't mind when I'm looking down. Alright, so currently I am reading, this is a pretty interesting book. One of the authors of this book reached out to me and asked if I would read it. And I thought I would try to get a physical copy because the cover is just awesome, I think. And their publisher, Sinister Grin Press, said yes, and they sent me a copy. And that's for Ain't Worth a Shit. And that's by Robert Essig, I believe, and Jack Bantry. It was Jack Bantry who reached out to me, so thank you. I started it, and you know what? It's a lot of fun so far. It's a crime story. I don't know if there's any horror in it, but Ain't Worth a Shit is, I like the title. The cover is interesting on the cover. I like the way it's designed because it sort of brings back sort of like an 80s feel movie poster for something that's really kind of trashy crime story. It just has like a sort of vintage feel to it, and you can tell it's going to be rather, and so far it is pretty, it's pretty nasty. Alright. I'm also reading, obviously, still Kill River by Cameron Robique. I'm actually near the end of it. This isn't accurate because I've been reading the ebook too, and I forget what chapter I'm on. It's much farther than this. I think I'm about page 200. A little bit farther than that. Yeah, 210 around there. And I'm really enjoying this book. It's a lot of fun. The one thing I like about it is Cameron Robique's his attention to detail when it comes to horror slasher films, because most slasher films, especially in the early 80s, they were all kind of slow burns, like Halloween. That's a really good example. You know, there's only, I think, 4 kills in Halloween. If I'm correct, I think there's only 4 kills in Halloween, and it's a good 90-minute movie. It's not a big kill list, and yet it's considered a classic. It's more about the story and the characters, and this one definitely falls into that. It's a bit of a slow burn, but you get to learn about the characters, and they're great characters because one thing you find in slashers is you have like the cast of young kids, and they're always annoying, or at least there's always an annoying person, and these kids, they certainly have their moments where they're annoying and you just want to slap them, but at the same time you get to know them and you get to care for them, and then you don't want any of them to die, but you know that's not going to happen. So I'm just getting to the part now at the end where the shit's really hitting the fan, and I'm really enjoying this. I think it's going to be a favorite of the year. And this is, of course, for the Bloody Beach read-along that Rachel from Shades of Orange has created. So definitely check that out. And I am also reading Book 5, The Wheel of Time. I have yet to find a cheap hardcover for that. I've been looking, and so I don't have a physical copy. But I'm nearing the end of that one as well. The audiobook was 36 hours, and I'm down to 10 hours left. So that's good. And there's a battle that's about to happen, which is always cool. I'm really enjoying it. It's a lot of fun. It seems to be getting more interesting the deeper we get into the series, and so I can't wait to see. I can't wait to finish this series, as I had hoped when I started. There's still like I don't know, close to about 9 books left, so we're gonna make it though. It's just gonna take a wee little bit. Okay, so I'm about to start. In fact, I did start. I started listening to the audio of I Call Upon Me by Ania Alborn. If you have a Scribd account and you want to read this book for the excuse me, for the Bloody Beach read along, go to Scribd. They have both the ebook and the audiobook, and I started the audiobook just before starting this video. I went to get a coffee and I threw it on over the car speakers, and so far I like the writing. It's very interesting. So I just started that. I'm also about to start, I was also contacted by this author in regards to my podcast, the Darkness Dwells podcast. I'll put a link to that in the show notes if you want to go check it out. We interview horror authors and then we talk about a movie. And he contacted me after he listened to my episode where I talked to another author that I guess he likes, Simon Strantzas. And Daniel Braum contacted me through our contact page on the website, and he wanted to know if I was interested in reading his books and having him on as a guest, and I said yes. And so he sent to me the ebook versions of The Serpent's Shadow, which is his recent book, and I believe it's published by Cemetery Dance. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure. And he also sent me a copy of The Night Marchers, which is his collection of short stories, also released by Cemetery Dance. So I'm looking forward to that, and thank you, Daniel, for sending me those. I'm going to get to them as soon as I can. We're going to get you on the show. And I'm also going to read in the beginning of August. I'm going to be reading Out Behind the Barn by Chad Lutzke and John Boden. And I'm going to be buddy reading that with Joanie Reads. So I'm going to be talking about that book. And I also want to get, in all honesty, I want to get Chad Lutzke on the Darkness Dwells podcast too. But I want to read as many books of his as I can before I do so, because there's a lot to talk about, I think. Alright, and what I really want to read, I found this book from BookBub in my email by Adrien Tchaikovski. Now, everyone who's heard that name would be familiar with him in regards to Children of Time, a science fiction book with giant sentient spider monsters. I haven't read that one yet. I really want to read that one, but that's not the book I'm talking about here. Redemption Blade by Adrien Tchaikovski went on sale for like $1.99, so I went and bought it. And it's a fantasy story, and the reason why I'm really interested in reading this one is because it takes, the typical fantasy trope of there's a Dark Lord who is wreaking havoc across the land. The Dark Lord is dead. He's been defeated, I guess, and this is the cleanup afterwards. And I just love that idea. And when I read that synopsis, I was like, oh, I gotta read this. And I want to read it really bad. Thankfully, it's not that long, so I don't know when I'm going to get to it, because I do have a reading schedule, and I'm not like this, I'm not a really fast reader, mostly because I have a kid who's 5 years old, and he does take up a lot of time when I'm not at work. So, I'm going to try to get to that, because it looks really, really interesting. Okay, I finished a bunch of books since the last update, and I'm going to go through them very quickly here. I was sent, because, again, Darkness Dwells tends to take up a lot of, my opinion, or not my opinions, but the books I read, because, I have them on the show, and I want to read their books before talking to them. And Matt Hayward, he'd been on the show before, when he was editing an anthology, Welcome to the Show. And so he reached out to me saying, I have this book coming out with Robert Ford. Would you have both of us on your show? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And he was kind enough to send me a free ebook without even asking. So I read it, and it's A Penny for Your Thoughts by Matt Hayward and Robert Ford. And this book was it was a lot of fun. I had a blast reading this, especially the first half. It's comical. It's very funny. Without using like a horror comedy trope. I don't think it falls into that category. It's just very entertaining, and some of the things that happen in the story are very funny. The basic premise is an ex-con, he's just released from jail, goes for a walk in the woods, and he finds a jar out by the river, and it's full of these old pennies that are taped to strips of paper, and on the pieces of paper are wishes. And these wishes, once he pulls them out, starts reading them, they tend to happen. And there's so many more things that happen with these pennies and the wishes written on the strips of paper. It's very intelligently written, and I had a blast reading it. I highly recommend it. Chaney actually reviewed it recently, so I recommend you go check that out. I'm going to try to remember to post a link to his review, because it was a really great review. And so yeah, penny for your thoughts. Definitely check that out. Speaking of Chaney, I read his short story, There Are Monsters Here. And I know I brought this up for another tag video. Same with penny for your thoughts, actually. But just to go over it quickly again, I really enjoyed this story. I wanted it to be longer because it felt like it could have been. We could have delved into, I think his name is Christopher, the main character. I'm bad with names. But yeah, so he's haunted. His whole family has like a curse on them, where they have a demon that haunts them and only they can see it. And as I said in that tag video, the main character is very haunted, but what I really liked about it was not only the family dynamic, but the fact that the main character decides to take it upon himself and tackle what's haunting him, his demon. And there's so many symbols in this story. The story is really more about mental illness and alcohol addiction and all the dark things that tend to haunt us and be considered demons in our own personal lives, where the monsters are more of a representation of that. And I really like that the main character decided to duke it out and fight with this demon. It's a very good story. I highly recommend it. I also read Terror Cell by Tim Curran, and at first, it's been a while since I read Tim Curran, and at the beginning of this story I thought, oh yes, famous, this is what Tim Curran is known for, and this is the type of Tim Curran I love. I really, really loved the beginning of Terror Cell, but near the end it just started to unravel, in my opinion. It's almost like Tim Curran didn't know where to go with it, and so he just started pulling things out of the air. And that's understandable. I'm not going to hate the book for that. It's just a little bit disappointing. I would recommend reading it just for the beginning, just to see what Tim Curran can do with tension and creepiness and whatnot. But if you were to read a Tim Curran book, I would go with like maybe Dead Sea or Fear Me or The Underdwelling. There's quite a few other really good ones. And while reading that book, I went to my Kindle store and bought a bunch of other Tim Curran books that I'm looking forward to. Especially, there's 2 books that are set in Vietnam. And if you watch my channel with any regularity, you know that I come from an area where I was obsessed when I was like 13 with the Vietnam War, and I don't get that. I also read The Wheel of Time, Book 4, Shadow Rising, and I really enjoyed it. So far it's my favorite of the series because it's a big history lesson with the Aiel, who are a race of humans in the book, and they have a very fascinating history, but their history is very tightly interconnected with the history of the Wheel of Time itself, and so you get to learn a lot about the universe through learning about the Aiel, and so I really enjoyed that. And there was also a really big battle at the end that got me all excited. And in Book 5, the main character who is in that battle has yet to reappear, and we're nearing the end of Book 5, so I guess he's going to be in Book 6. I can't remember from my last read of it, and I didn't finish the series then either, so I don't know. I hope that we do get back to Perrin at some point. I was also kindly sent an e-copy of Spicey, Constellations, and Other Recipes by Chad Lutzke, and I read this book, and I think I might do a separate review on this because I had a bunch of notes, and I've talked about it already, but this book was really good. It's a great collection of short stories. There's only a couple, almost no collection or anthology of short stories resonates with me 100%. It's almost like an album of music. There's always going to be a song or two that just doesn't seem to fit for whatever reason with you. And this collection was no different. But having said that, overall, this is a really good collection, and I highly recommend you reading it. And if I do that video, there's like some quotes I want to read to you, and I was thinking of doing something like what Chaney did, not to copy him, but just to emulate my love for Chad Lutzke's literature. He's going to be like the biggest find of this year, I think, so far. And I was thinking of maybe doing a video on his works once I'm done reading at least a good 90% of them. All right, I also read Pines by Blake Crouch. I read this in like 2 sittings, and it was a lot of fun. Like, the reason why I read it in 2 sittings is by how fast the pace of the book was. The pacing is just incredible. It's like boom, 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 and it's addictive. You can't stop reading it. And it's not going to make my favorite of this year, I don't think. It might make somewhere near the top 10. But it was a lot of fun regardless, and I want to finish this. I can't talk today. I want to finish the series. And I probably would have if it wasn't for my busy reading schedule. And so you know what? I recommend reading that. I think it has a very interesting concept from beginning to end. There's such a huge gap, and there's so many interesting things that happen in there. And then the ending happens, and it's just it's a little bit mind-blowing, and I don't know how he can continue the series and be as exciting as in the first book once you know what's going on. It's incredible. So maybe it will make higher in my list. I don't know. I find, and I've decided actually, that I'm going to stop rating books. I'm going to stop giving star ratings, at least here on BookTube. I'll still give the star ratings on like Amazon reviews or Goodread reviews, but the reason why I'm going to stop is because I really do need the book to settle for a while. And when I think about it in the past tense, when I remember reading it after I've been separated from it for a while, that's where the true feeling comes in. And now that I just recalled Pines, it's been a couple of weeks since I read it, I'm remembering it much more fondly than I did when I finished it. And that's saying something, because I really enjoyed reading it. So that's interesting. Okay, I also read Fog Warning by Edward Lorn. This book was it was interesting. I find that Edward's prose is it's really clean. I didn't find any mistakes or anything. The one thing I did find is that there were some aspects that seemed like they put me out of the story. Overall, I really enjoyed this story. I believe I gave it 3.5, maybe 4 out of 5 stars. Whatever the case, I recommend reading it. Fog Warning was the one thing I really enjoyed about Fog Warning is that Edward Lorn takes the main character, and he does something interesting with his character arc that most writers would probably have fixed the main character, but Edward Lorn doesn't fix him. He starts off basically a doctor that's addicted to pain medications, Oxycontins, and I'm going to leave it at that. I really enjoyed the arc though, because like I said, I guess I did spoil it, but most authors would fix that, but he didn't. And in a sense, if it was to become a series or something like that, which I don't think he has any intentions of doing, maybe that would be something in the future where he could fix within the character's flaw. But that, I like reading about flawed characters. I like reading about broken characters, and sometimes it annoys me when the character is fixed up and healed by the end of it. I don't know why that is. I think maybe it's just a little unrealistic. We tend to break and not get fixed, if that makes any sense. It's also kind of depressing, isn't it? Alright, so I'm going to leave it at that. Yeah, it was funny how I said I'm not going to do any more ratings, and then I rate Edward Lorn's book. Well, that was the Goodreads. You know, my rating on BookTube here is going to be more like, yeah, read it, or don't read it. I would say read it, just to go, especially if you're looking for Edward Lorn that isn't really brutal. Alright, so that is my reading update, and thank you for sticking around. If you stuck around this long, please hit the like button, and please leave a comment, and subscribe, all that stuff. Thanks again for watching, keep being creative, and I will catch you in the next bookish video.